You know the day destroys the night, night divides the day. Try to run, try to hide, break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side.
God bless America. Welcome to The Ranch, everybody. The podcast that explores the people and happenings of Dry Creek Ranch, Eagle, and the greater Boise area. This is another round of the West Ada School District Board of Trustee candidate interviews. One thing to remember, nobody knew what questions I was going to ask. I absolutely did not post any of these videos until the last interview was done, so nobody knew what was actually going to be said in the interviews. And if you could, real fast, please do consider just hitting subscribe and like if you're on YouTube, or just subscribing if you're on Apple Podcasts. I greatly appreciate the support. The more subscribers we get, the better guests we can get on, and the more informed the community can be. And I do want to thank our sponsor for this episode, 208 Land Company. They are a landscaping company doing an incredible amount of work in Dry Creek Ranch and the surrounding areas, specifically because they get the job done. I've heard from a lot of people that have used them or are getting bids from them. They're very, very pleased with them. So if you have any landscaping work that you want to get done in your house, 208 Land Company. My guest today is running for school board in Zone 4. She is a mom, she loves education, and she really feels like there's a lot of work to be done with the school district. She does feel like there are some issues that have sprung up over the years, and she wants to be part of that conversation, which I thought, again, loving communication was pretty cool. So, without further ado, the woman, the myth, the legend, Mari Gates. It was like, we had an argument one day about, can a calculator be honest? People were like, well, yeah. We're like, well, can it lie? It was like, no. Well, it's like, well, then how can it be honest? If it doesn't have the capacity to lie, then there's no honesty in the calculator. It just is. It's like a rock. Like a rock can't be water. You don't say like the rock is deciding to be a rock. It just is what it is. So don't say you're being honest because you could never lie. You have to say, I'm being honest because I absolutely could lie, but I'm choosing not to. That's the nature of honesty. You don't get the benefit of being virtuous if you don't have the capacity to not be virtuous.
Right.
Like random things like that.
I love that.
It's a good time. How are you?
I'm good. Good. Still wrapping my head around, can you be honest without being honest? Like, or without having the capacity to be dishonest?
Right. If you can't be deceitful, then you don't get the virtue of being honest. Like, again,
Right.
The calculator example. The calculator's not honest because it can't say 1 + 1 is 3.
But you're
it
not
just is.
But we're not talking about something that's inanimate, or you are talking about something that's inanimate that doesn't have the compass or the mores, right? So you're talking about something that's inanimate.
Let me give you one that's really fair to what we're about to do right now.
Okay.
You describe me as a very fair interviewer.
From what I have read or
Yes,
seen
I'm
or
not saying
watched or
that's like
heard,
your
yes.
stamp of approval, but you just in the conversation before the mics went hot, you said, well, you seemed fair from what I have seen.
Yes.
I'm not fair because I'm not smart enough to be not fair. I'm plenty smart to ask mean or unfair questions. I just don't. I choose not to because I don't think it benefits me or you or anybody listening. So I would say I'm fair because I choose to be fair. It's not that I'm incapable of being unfair. That's my point.
You have integrity.
I have integrity and I can choose to not have integrity.
Exactly.
Right. So I get credit theoretically for being an, interviewer with integrity. That, I don't know. These are philosophical things that I really enjoy kind of bumbling around with because...
And you're talking to somebody who got an honors degree from Stanford in political philosophy, which was not exactly the
philosophy.
most... Yes.
Tell me about... Okay, so how do you go from political philosophy at Stanford to Eagle, Idaho, running for school board? Walk me through that progression.
Oh, gosh. Well, there's a lot of chapters to that. So,
give me the Cliff Notes.
The Cliff Notes. So I actually went to Stanford under the guise that I would be a scientist like my parents. Both my parents are scientists, and they're both teachers. My dad's more of a researcher now, but my mom's retired. But I thought, I'm going to be hardcore science like everybody else in my family, and probably do pre-med or something like that. My dad has had cancer since I was 10. So in and out of remission, lots of surgeries, lots of chemo, lots of radiation. And when I was in college, he got sick again, but that was the worst time. I was actually his bone marrow donor.
Oh, wow.
So I got tested, went up to Hutchinson Center in Seattle for all of that. Didn't end up actually donating because he forewent the treatment, which saved his life. The Hutchinson Center there had a 100% mortality rate and wasn't telling anybody. We had no idea. So when I came back to school, I had taken a soft stop So I could do work from home, or I could just kind of pick up where I left off. I came back and I couldn't stomach the thought of being in hospital rooms or research facilities where people weren't being honest. It hit me in the core of who I was. So I'm Latina. I was part of that group. And we did some kind of political stuff on campus, mainly for the equal representation of the workers on campus, because there was this really big, I guess, problem or dichotomy between the faculty getting their salaries and then staff salaries. And so, like, our chef at our house, he was basically getting minimum wage, and our professors were living in houses on campus getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we didn't understand why. Is the value of your education, that much that you should be making so much that this person can't afford to feed his family? I mean, it was just ridiculous. So our community did some sit-ins and did some political activist stuff to change, what was going on campus. And so I started getting involved in politics. Took my first politics class and ended up in the library in what we call the stacks late one night, and I had all these books around me, and I was reading, a little bit of Mills, a little bit of Hume, a little bit of, Rawls, and I had all of these, I guess, political philosophers sitting on the floor with me, and I was just kind of talking to myself, going through these things, and I was holding a book kind of haphazardly in my hand, and a professor or a gentleman walked by, and he goes, "So is that one any good?" And I said, "Well, I have some questions about it." And he looked at me like I had four heads, and he was the author. And he goes, "Why don't you come to my office hours and we'll talk about those questions?" So he ended up being my thesis, like my honors thesis advisor. And I switched from science, like hardcore science, to fuzzy science, and did the rest of my, I guess, time at Stanford doing political philosophy. I did some neuroscience and political philosophy. So that's me.
Man, I'm a big fan of Mills. Bentham Mills had some good
loved
stuff.
It. I still love him to this day. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah, interesting. So that was the start of your education. Mm-hmm. Now you're up here, right? We'll cut forward
through
a little
the middle
bit.
because it's a long, lot of stories, lots of twists and turns, and I ended up here with a family.
And who's really happy about their 20s? Nobody needs to hear about the 20s. But the point is, we end up here. Mm-hmm. You have students in the district, and you just decide that, hey, I know how to make my life considerably more difficult and frustrating. Oh, yeah. I'm going to run for school board.
Who does that better than a mom? We've got 3 kids. We're working. We're doing all this other stuff. We like to fill our plates. That being said, I guess there are issues, especially when it comes to my kids and their future, that I'm not willing to maybe, what's the word I'm looking for? Make concessions for. The word I'm looking for is escaping me, but
you're not willing to concede points with some regard to their education.
Yeah, and their treatment. So I have a daughter who was originally a special needs kid. She's not going to talk, she's not going to walk, not going to eat solid food. That was our expectation. And we kind of said, whoa, let's pump the brakes. Why is that? Well, she doesn't have hips that have can hold the femoral head. The acetabulum is perfectly flat. Well, how can we change that? Is there surgery? No, there's no surgery. We have to grow. There's no way she can weight bear without subluxating her hips. She's not going to grow. She's not going to walk. She'll never crawl. And I said, well, bones as a child are really soft and malleable, correct? I said, yeah. So if she could weight bear, theoretically over time, she could create these hip sockets. Well, yeah, but there's no way to do that for a child, and we don't know the size. So we built slings out of Jenny jumpers and seatbelts, and we ratcheted her to the ceiling and slowly over time lowered her to the ground, and her femoral heads now fit in the sockets, and they're 99% normal.
Wow. And you did this all with a
Jenny jumper. And
this podcast is brought to you by mtustudios.com. If you are looking to start a podcast or make content for any level of your business, MTU Studios can help. Just reach out to us today and we can start shooting tomorrow.
Seatbelts. My husband was the one that thought it up and kind of built it. And then he started building parallel bars all over our house. We have walls that still have kind of a little bit of scars from, we called them ballet bars, but we weren't going to let her, we weren't going to let someone say, she will never, or she can't. Because to label or to restrict a child in any way, I think, is just our biggest mistake. So we gave her access to the house, and now she walks, talks, does ballet. She's 5. She, beats up on her brothers, and I love it. But to be limiting to children, I think, is a really big mistake. So that's kind of where this started. And then there was the whole playground thing at Seven Oaks that kind of irritated me. And I wanted to get involved, and I was, do I get involved? I kind of got involved in the back burner, but I wanted to support the families that were really trying to, do what was right, I thought, for their kids. And I did all the legal research and pulled all the public records that people needed whenever they need. I love research. That's what I would do. I would just do legal and historical research until my fingers fell off. But that's kind of where I got this seed to run. Is my kids were asking some questions about these different issues, and I said, you know what? When you see an injustice and you don't stand up, it's just as wrong as being part of the injustice. So silence is a part of this whole thing, and if we're silent about things, we're just as vile, as some of the aggressors in some of these issues. And so when I just thought about running, I told my kids, there's certain issues I really want to support in this community. I think education is incredibly valuable. It's invaluable. It's your future. We're creating the future scientists and doctors and lawyers. God forbid. I did go to law school, so I can say that. So why not give them the best foot forward? And if there's decisions being made on a level and I feel like they're not the right ones, and I can sit back and complain about it, but if I'm not willing to stick my neck out there and be a part of the change or what have you, then I'm just as negligible as those people that I'm complaining about, I guess is what I'm trying to say. There's probably a much more eloquent way to say all of this, but I guess I want my kids to put their money where their mouth is, and so in order for them to do that, I have to. Gotcha.
There's a lot there.
There's a lot there.
Amazing about your daughter. Wonderful that you didn't take no for an answer. There were a lot of things that you said that I want to hit on.
Okay.
First off, let's start with it sounds like you feel like the district has done an injustice, and that's a big motivating factor. At least I heard you say it. It's like, okay, you can't stand for the injustice. Help me understand that.
Well, the injustice occurred, I think, when we originally kind of looked at like the playground issues, and they were thinking, well, are these ADA accessible and are they not, and who's having access and who's not, whose IEPs are being followed. I want all kids to have access to education, and I know that there's kids that have different needs, and mine's one of them. Cognitively, she's right on par, which is wonderful, but physically, she still stumbles, and I want her to have access to ballet or soccer or the playground. And if we look at all 57 schools in West Ada, are we going to see that they're all compliant with a 1960s code that, they should be accessible? Even if they were built after in, 1980, why weren't they built up to code? Why can't all kids access them, these structures? Why are we leaving some kids out? I want my kids to stand up for those kids. Whether or not they're their friends or their sister, I want them to be able to be a part of the community. They have value because they're human. Right.
So that's true. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. Mm-hmm. The playground issue at Seven Oaks is really complex.
It is. There's a lot going on there.
And again, the injustice, essentially, it sounds like you're saying let's stop saying injustice. The problem that it seems like you're kind of hitting on is there were playgrounds there that were not ADA compliant and did not allow that level of physical education and activity to all students, or to the degree that the ADA would at least say that they should, right? Because it doesn't have to be every single piece of equipment. It has to be a certain portion of the equipment. So, okay, no disagreement there. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. everything that then happens, do you feel that that's part of, and again, the background naturally is that, you know, a group of parents in the end of 22, or excuse me, end of 21.
21 and 22, yeah.
21, yeah. So the end of 21, they're like, all right, we need to get this ball rolling. We need to start fundraising. And they start fundraising and doing things. The district indicates that sometime in October of 22 is when they're first, you know, officially alerted. And again, I know that there are a lot of people that are saying that's not true. We had been talking to the principal. The principal had been reaching out.
Right. There's a lot of layers to this. There's a lot of feelings involved. There's a lot going on there.
A huge amount.
My problem comes with student, parent, teacher accessibility to the district to ask questions. I feel like the district itself, you know, has done, there's a lot to be said for what they have done. And I think they don't get all the credit that they need, but they're also looking after an incredibly large school district. Sure. And 27th in the entire country is huge. And maybe it shouldn't be that big. But that's probably a discussion for another time.
Like the possibility of splitting it?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
What would be so wrong with making it more accessible to teachers, faculty, family, students, and having a platform for us to discuss what's going on and discuss some problems or issues, and come to different kind of consensus on those issues without it being a screaming match or iced out, or I think it just needs to be a channel or a foundation for discussion. And a lot of parents were upset because they weren't heard, or they didn't feel heard. And that's the problem.
Right.
I want to be accessible. I might not be able to fix that problem right now, but why don't we list a few of the things that we know we can address right now, and a few of the things we might have to table or put on a levy and wait for a year. But I want to be able to hear you above this, you know, no screaming. Just come to the table.
Right.
I want there to be a table. And I feel like with the size of the district, with the amount that we have going on, we lose the table.
Gotcha. And you feel like the current board as it stands is just they're doing with too many things to actually give due time and consideration to the individual parents that come forward?
Well, I want to be fair to them. I mean, like I said, they have a huge district to oversee and to hear out. And I know that a lot of them have done a really good job. Do I think there's room for improvement? Absolutely. But where isn't there? What I think needs to happen, though, is I think that there needs to be a forum for these kinds of frustrations and problems before they get litigious. Because I think that once that ball gets rolling, it's almost impossible to change something in anybody's favor. I think that having a place to mediate those things before it gets to that degree is where I want to be.
Man, I love communication. I mean, that's really at the heart of avoiding every other alternative. Like that's just the way it goes. So yeah, I have a great appreciation for that, which is, hey, is there some way that, you know, we can come together well before, you know, because so much, I mean, especially interviewing the city council candidates and then the mayoral candidates for Eagle, you realize that the majority of people, or excuse me, not the majority of people, but a lot of the frustrations that people convey to me when I'm going into these interviews is just that they're not being listened to. The citizens are not being listened to. They're not being heard. And if they are being heard, there's really no indication of that consideration. And Avamore is obviously a giant thing. And a lot of people said, look, we set records for the public participation, and they were all overwhelmingly, or not all of them, but almost all of them overwhelmingly were against it. Mm-hmm. And you know, we weren't really given a reason why being against it was not in our long-term best interest. They were just kind of like, well, you're not considering everything. So I get what you're saying. And it seems like there's really that sentiment in a wide range in the area.
Yeah. And I feel like it's important to be heard. It's important to be felt, to feel like you've been heard. It's the basis of a lot of conflict here. And, you know, we are a large and growing community, and that is part of the problem. But that doesn't mean that we can't take extra time and sit down and say, okay, what does everything mean? You didn't take into consideration everything. Okay, well, maybe we didn't. Let's break it down. Right. Let's take 5 minutes and break it down.
Talk to me about growth, because you said we're a growing community, we're a growing district. These are all true things. How do we manage growth effectively to stay at the high end education and quality of experience that the students in West Ada and the families of West Ada have come to expect?
Well, yeah. So growth is wonderful for, businesses here. It's wonderful for a lot of reasons. Diversity. We as a community need to embrace growth in some ways, but in some ways it can be really challenging, and we have a lot more voices to hear. We have a lot more people to reach. We need a lot more resources to get to children. We have a lot more expectation when there's growth. I think that the levy or the plant levy that failed, it's kind of disappointing. But my problem with some of these levies and bonds is that we're not seeing, people aren't being educated on what they mean. When we want to pass the plant levy, we want to increase, teachers and increase retention, and we want to add another school, and we want to increase bus routes, and we want to add computers, and we want to do all these things. But we're not laying it out in a way that's accessible for voters. What was the plant levy? It doesn't sound like, what it was. I mean, we're talking about Meridian and the library and the schools. And if you ask me, well, did you support it or not, especially when it comes to growth? I mean, that was going to deal with a lot of these problems in terms of growth, right? If we add more schools, we add more faculty. And we have to be also willing as a large and growing community to pay for those things. And sometimes that's really hard, especially if you don't have kids in the system in West Ada. And it's hard for a lot of voters to stomach, but it's also really important. And with that growth comes commitment to, infrastructure, and schools are an important and invaluable part of that infrastructure. So,
gotcha. And again, I do want to hit the levy a little bit more in detail, but again, just the levy didn't pass, right? No. So, and that's not going to stop families and children from joining the West Ada boundary,
right?
So, how do we deal with growth now, today? Like, what are things that is the school that the district is doing that are good, and what are things that they're doing that you think could be improved on today? Because I mean, we all have constraints. If we had $1 billion, it's like, okay, fire hose and 5 new schools and whatever you want. But that's not really what we have, right? Mm-mm. So what are the areas that you feel like we're doing an all right job with, and what are the areas you feel like we're not?
Well, public education is really important. And I think there's people out there that are willing to kind of remove public education or try to remove public education. And that's kind of frightening to me. There's also an issue with being able to choose where your child goes to school. And while I, as a parent, would love to be able to say, my children are all brilliant geniuses and they deserve to go to this school with all of these resources and that's not the way it works. And I do want parents to have some input into where their child goes and where their resources are going. But if we did that, we end up with a really imbalanced district, because it's just the truth that some resources are going to be stuck here and other resources are going to be neglected over here. And so it's important with that growth to see that we are diversifying where kids are going to school. However, we want people to still have kind of a hand in where they're going to school, whether that is the lottery system that we've kind of discussed before, with charter schools and with there was another, the name of it's escaping me. But with determining where they're going within the district. So with growth and with decision making, which kids are going where, and looking at sizes of schools, we have to take into consideration, the demographics and how we're going to equally handle, which areas are growing faster than others. We don't want to end up having to redistrict everything because of growth in Eagle or growth in Avamore. But at the same time, the district is the 27th largest in the country, and maybe it shouldn't be.
This is the second time you've said this. What are you saying? Okay, What do you mean by that? Like, and like, what do you say? Like, maybe it should, but like, what's the alternative in like practical sense?
In the practical sense, as in like dividing up the school districts. So
I don't know. You got to tell me.
I think it's something that needs to be discussed. I'm not going to be the one that makes specific decisions. I want to be the one that helps make those decisions on a board.
Sure.
But I'm not saying this is the way it's going to be. I want to say, hey, here's some ideas.
Okay, so what's the idea? So I'm on the board or I'm a parent and I'm like, hey, you said we were going to talk about the potential of not being the 27th largest district. What do you mean?
I mean, maybe we should have, and this is something I want to discuss. This is not something I'm saying, hey, this is my platform. This is what I'm running for. But I want to open the table up to discussion on saying, hey, maybe we can best serve these teachers and these families in these communities by dividing this up. Maybe Meridian and Star and Eagle have, enough children and enough constituents to say, you know what, you'll be better heard if we break it down a little bit, do some of this Mills kind of ideology where we break it down to the republic and we say you can be better heard if the district is smaller. We deal with issues that are close to home, and maybe that's something that should be considered down the road. I don't know. I think it's something that needs to be talked about. So yeah,
Gotcha.
But I do want there to be a platform for that to be talked about, and I want it to be talked about in the case that we had issues over here in Star where we thought, oh, should we do the 4-day work week? Will it help teacher retention? Why is it that the board is making those decisions instead of bringing the teachers in and say, hey, why are you guys leaving? What's the primary reason for this turnover? Let's bring some more people to the table and hear them out and come up with some ideas collectively, and try to help support these teachers instead of, oh, we can implement this plan and it'll reduce teacher retention.
And I'm not 100% familiar with this plan. I understand the concept broadly, but do you feel like that proposal or that idea was crafted in a vacuum without feedback from the faculty?
I'm sure there was feedback. I can't say I know exactly how much and how many people were asked and who was brought on board. I haven't done enough research to know that, but I don't think enough people were invited to the table.
Gotcha. So let's talk about the levy. Okay. A lot, again, just like the playground, there's a lot here. What are your thoughts on the levy? What do you think caused it to not pass? And if you were in favor of it, which I think you mentioned that you were, if you were, and you can feel free to answer yes or no, but if you were, what do you think we could do to get something to pass like that in the future? Because we're going to have to fund the schools somehow, right? So again, what do you think happened with the levy?
Honestly, I don't know. This is me guessing, but I think that people need to be better informed on what their levies are that they're voting for. I mean, we have such low voter turnout for these and bonds. There's not enough people getting involved, and that's hard, especially when we're talking about our kids' futures. But we do also need to have a lot of transparency in these and see where money's coming, what it's going to. Do I think that the grounds for a playground is really $160,000? No, but I want to see that broken down in real terms. Where's this money going? How much is really needed for, the school, the teachers down the road? And I think that sometimes we say, okay, we need this much money to build this, but people don't really see, where that's coming from, line item. I'd like to see it written out in front of me. I think a lot of people would. If I'm going to be opening my pocketbook, and I'm an older person and I don't have kids in the school, I want to make sure that it's going to the appropriate places. I also want to be well informed. And I think that we're kind of missing the boat on information and getting people to vote.
Gotcha. I did speak with an older resident who moved from out of state. And you had mentioned, again, you're bringing up the person who doesn't have students in the district, right? Now, Eagle has, on average, a little bit of an older population. It is getting younger on average, but there are a lot of older people here who presumably either don't have kids that go here or the kids are almost out, right? And dealing with a 10-year levy where it's kind of like, listen, this isn't 1 or 2 or 3 years. This is like, I'm in it for 10.
Right.
What do you say to those people? Like, what's the explanation to them, which is this is in your best interest, in spite of the fact that let's just say don't have kids in the district anymore. This is in your best interest to commit to this 10-year time frame.
Right. And part of that is, it's a great question. Part of that is you're paying for children's futures and education of Eagle. We want to be known for providing our kids with the best education and opportunities that we can. I'm sure that most of these people came from a public school too. Not all of them. But I'm sure a lot of these people benefited from public education too. So it's not like it's a foreign concept to pay for, pay it forward. But it's kind of that utilitarian, if we help promote this next generation, how much better off we're going to be. We want to promote Eagle as, a strong, well, not just Eagle, but this community, West Ada, with a strong background for these kids to grow up and be successful. Because ultimately, the success of these kids and the success of these families is going to impact our communities. So, yeah, we foot the bill. We foot the bill for things that we don't always benefit from directly, but we benefit from them indirectly. Our education, our healthcare, there's a lot of things we could go on and on and on about when living in the body politic. So, yeah, it's part of being part of a society.
Gotcha. What's an alternative that you think would obviously if you want these to pass and you realize like, okay, look, $500 million, 10 years, it didn't work. And it didn't work for a myriad of reasons. Could be communication, as you're pointing out. Maybe the benefits weren't appropriately expressed to people. Mm-hmm. It could be a number of things.
You're steep.
Steep. That's not a joke, man.
No, it's steep.
That's a big chunk of change. So what do you think could have been modified in that to get a successful passing in the future?
See, again, this whole issue of transparency is really where I want to come from. I think people really need to know where that tax dollar is going.
Well, they had line items. It was like $15 million for a playground.
Right.
It's like,
wait a second. Yeah.
Big slide. Huge slide.
Yeah, we're doing water fountains.
Yeah, right. That's actually not uncommon for the area. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if
splash pad.
Yeah, right. Like people make splash pads. Okay, so that's in jest. You're not actually talking splash pads. But
no,
the point
I'm not.
is, there were these broader stroke line items that did say like, all right, $30 million for roofs, or $15 million for playgrounds, and
right.
$50 million for security, and so on and so forth.
Right, and it was just a big chunk of change. And I think everybody kind of understands that yes, we do need more schools, and yes, we do need more libraries, and we do need more access to all of these things as a growing community, but to have that much up front is really hard to swallow. And maybe it's something that we need to break down over time. We can do this one in this couple of years, we can do this one in this couple of years, and we can break it up. There's got to be a way to look at it, to even it out, to make it easier to swallow. People are fighting with a lot of things: inflation, the cost of childcare, education's another one of those, and we need to figure out where our priorities are. But yeah, I think breaking that down, it was just too much for people to swallow.
So you would say perhaps a smaller total ask, or a shorter time frame,
or broken up. Yeah, there's got to be other ways we can look at this and still get it done without footing a humongous $10 billion bill over the next 10 years. There's got to be a way, or $500 million over the next 10 years. There's got to be a way to.
What's $500 million between friends?
Right, exactly. Just come on over to my house.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
So there's just got to be ways to look at it and to say, hey, there's people that are way smarter than I am, that do economics and can say, hey, we can look at this way and see exactly what we need now. If we need another school, we know how much it's going to cost us. Let's break it down. Let's do it in smaller bites. And see how much we can get done to help the kids now. I talked to a middle school teacher who has 180 students this year. How is she supposed to get to know these kids? How is she supposed to get to know their need, or what's happening at home, or if they're getting their homework done? These teachers need to know that that they're supported and they're not completely overwhelmed. And one way to do that is, like I said, passing a bond or a levy that's going to help give them those resources, give them that support, give them smaller class sizes. But there's a story behind where this money is going, and I think that needs to be part of the picture. And we're not just asking for $500 million to build a splash pad and a nice brand new shiny school. These kids are being swamped.
Gotcha. Something that you said that actually sparked a thought. Do we actually need more libraries? And I ask because I have a middle schooler, and we were shocked that he's not schlepping his books around, because they have, laptops that they're provided. And
also heavy.
The laptop?
Yeah.
Not compared to a calculus book, bro. Like,
oh, I know. Have you carried law school books? Jeez, I used to ride my bike.
Okay.
I was going, holy moly. Yeah.
And last I checked, a laptop, like per unit of weight of book, like 30,000 books for, the weight of one very, very small white pages. So do we actually need that? I've been shocked by the amount that we're digitizing the education system, either with textbooks or drills and instruction and things of that nature. And do you see public school libraries reducing in size or reducing in importance and utility, considering the alternatives?
No. I value libraries and I value the written word, but you're also talking to somebody who loves to write and loves to read. You're not going to get away from digitizing education. And if anything, we're going to see more of it in different ways that we can't imagine. We're going to read a lot and do a lot, on our computers from now on. And it's a very different world than one that I grew up in, where I craved an encyclopedia. I wanted my parents to buy me that Britannica set when I was a kid. They never did. But Mom and Dad, if you're listening, you never did get me that Britannica set. So, it's just... There's something about going into a library. There's something about flipping a page. There's something about being part of a community, going in and saying, hey, have you seen this? You're not going to be able to flip through a library catalog on your laptop the same way you can browse in the library. And you'd be amazed at what my kids pick up that I would never have thought of just walking through a library. And there's lots more to the library than just looking through picture books or grabbing a graphic novel or Charlotte's Web. There's a lot more. There's the other kids that you meet in the library. Heck, there's my professor that I met that opened my world to political philosophy because I was in a library. Libraries are invaluable, and so is written word. And I think that it would be a huge injustice to take libraries away and digitize everything. There's something really gratifying about turning a page, and I know a lot of these kids don't like we used to. We used to earmark and bookmark where we've been. We're like, man, I've read this much. And you get so proud, right?
Oh, so proud.
I've read digitally 48 pages. But,
right.
When you look at it, libraries are incredibly valuable places where we open up our worlds and our minds to things that we never knew existed. Just walking down an aisle and being like, what the heck was that? I want to read that because it was there. You can't do that in a digital world.
No, you can't. It's not as gratifying. My very dear friend sent me a copy of Lonesome Dove recently, and sitting down and reading it, and we have very similar experiences in the world that he felt really related to some degree to the stories, and it was one of his favorite books. I had never read it, and so he sent it to me, and it absolutely is true. Just I read a lot on my phone. Mm-hmm. Which is funny because you get glares with people when you're staring at your phone. You're like, no, I'm reading.
I'm reading a book. It's legitimate.
Right.
I'm not going through Facebook.
If I was sitting there like this, nobody would give me the stink eye. No. But if I'm reading a book, if I'm doing anything on my phone, people assume I'm on Instagram looking at leg day photos or something.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's bad. But which is
funny because if a kid does the same thing, it's the opposite in their group. I have a kid that would much rather sit on the park bench and read a book, and one that would be playing soccer and jumping off things. But sure. He'll take a book to the park, and a kid will look at him funny. But if he was on his phone, just on his phone.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. There's something very, very different.
Phone.
Yeah, there's something very, very different about being on your phone versus flipping through the books. And, and the experience we get is different. I want my kids to still have those real book experiences. And there's things that they can pick up and read that, like I said, they'd never just find perusing a digital catalog for a search term.
Those little neighborhood libraries I find to be so So awesome. The little birdhouse.
I know. I keep asking my husband to build me one. Can we please build one? Yeah.
Yeah. But you gotta take it seriously because you can't let moisture get in there. You can't let the door fly open. They can't be easy to break. People are throwing books in. I mean, the whole thing. So I think there's more to it than
there's a lot more to it than just converting the doghouse.
Yeah, right. So libraries. Libraries aren't going to go away.
No. Well, I would hope not, but yeah, love libraries.
Love libraries. There are a lot of very weird things going on in the public education sphere nationally, right? You have, I don't know if you're familiar with the big brouhaha down in Chino Hills, where it was, the parents essentially in California passed a resolution, or the board passed a resolution that required that parents be notified if their students struggling in any way with their gender identity and things of that nature. And somebody from on high in the state came out to tell them how they were creating unsafe places in the household because whatever. What are your thoughts on that? Because I think these issues are around West Ada, right? They're in districts around West Ada, but they haven't taken root in West Ada at this point.
I mean, they're not hot button issues right now.
Yeah. They're well, sure. What are your thoughts?
Well, what are my thoughts on being told your child has a gender identity issue or questions? Is that
okay, first off, you don't have to take a specific position on that issue unless you want to, but my thought is I think it's very clear that the majority of people that enjoy the West Ada Public School District want and feel that they should be the first line of defense for their students. And they don't enjoy the idea that a school district might say, hey, we have to keep your kids safe from you, which is finding representation in other areas of not just the country, but other areas of this state, right? There was, I believe it was Caldwell that had a big brouhaha over parents really upset. They're like, no, you need to change this immediately. What are your thoughts on that? How do you think that's appropriate to keep out of West Ada? And if you do, how do we do that?
Wow, that's a really compact question. So I think we're probably have to look at it on two levels. And first off is the parent level. So my kid's going to school, and how much do I want the school board or the school to be involved in their personal stuff? Well, they're going to be seeing my kid a lot more than I am, and I have to be able to trust that they're going to make good, sound decisions. They're going to be the first line of defense. They're going to see these kids way more than we do. And so they're probably going to know a little bit more than the parent, which is concerning, but also we hope that we are putting our kids in the right people's hands, that they're making good decisions. And
when you say they, is it the kids making good decisions or the
No,
adults?
I'm talking about the adults.
Okay.
We're trusting our kids to strangers, and we want them to be making good decisions. And I don't know that, I want a stranger to make a decision about, my child per se, but if it's coming to safety, absolutely, tell me if something's unsafe. You're there more than I am, and I need to, I want to be involved in that decision. But parents do need to be involved in these choices,
whether
their child is having an
identity
crisis or reading different things. The parent does need to be involved. It's ultimately that child's parent. But the school, this is a really tough one because it's delicate. And there's going to be issues that you want the school to be involved in when it comes to safety, and issues that you don't
like what?
When it comes to privacy. I think there's certain private matters that even the Supreme Court has said belong kind of inside our houses.
I'm sorry, you said two things, and I said like what? What I was specifically saying is, what are the things that you want the school involved in with regard to safety of your child, that it wouldn't be like, okay, we transfer you straight to your mom and dad. Like, okay, freeze, don't move, put a pin in this, whatever the issue is, whatever you're doing as a student, we're picking up the phone, your mom's on the way, and here we go. So there's that, or, okay, you're having a safety issue. We're not going to call your parent yet. You talk to me, and then we'll involve them later. Like, what would that situation be? Because I'm just asking because I can't really think. And again, I have a middle schooler. It's like, listen, if anything happens to that dude at any point of the day, in any situation that has to do with anything with his safety, you call me or the wife or both of us on conference, FaceTime, however you want to, immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
that's right. So but you were saying there are some things that you want them involved in and some things you don't. So what are the things you would want them involved in?
When it comes to their physical safety, their mental health, I want them to be involved because they're there. I want them to give me a heads up, say, hey, this happened, or hey, we saw this, or hey, this person's acting inconsistent with what they're normally doing.
Right.
Those are the kinds of things. I don't want them making decisions that a parent would be uncomfortable making. You're choosing to go to a different bathroom. It's just not. The school is a place for education, first and foremost. They need to be safe. They need to be learning. They need to be part of a community that they feel like they're involved in and welcomed in. But I think these are going to probably have to be case by case, kid by kid situations where, a teacher, a principal calls and says, hey, this may or may not be an issue. Do you want us involved or not? But for the most part, physical safety, mental health, and the educational progress of my kid, I want them to be getting the most out of school. And if something is coming between them and school, I need to know about it.
Right. And I have great appreciation for that, especially at the elementary school my kids go to. I definitely had an experience at the elementary school where we got a heads up from the administration that like, hey, look, your kid just looked a little off. I don't know what happened. And the principal actually went up and was like, hey, come talk to me. What's going on? And again, this was actually in like the first week that we moved here. And the principal was so engaged and, observant that she was able to grab my kid and say like, hey, come talk to me. What's up? And there was something that was bothering him and it wasn't good. And they took swift, decisive action, alerted us. And again, he wasn't in trouble. Somebody just done something bad and he was bothered by it because he had just moved here. That was beautiful. I was like, oh my God, these people really are paying attention. So when you talk about physical safety and emotional safety, being sensitive to people, like you're kind of acting off, even when she had only, just met him a few days prior, like, that's great. That's great. So I have a great appreciation for that.
But that also comes with smaller school size, right? We couldn't do that if we were completely overwhelmed and had a million kids that, we couldn't. We live in an area where we're really lucky to have smaller schools. We just are. And, even where I grew up down the road and, my graduating class was like 80 people. And our teachers knew when we were off. And it is a wonderful and beautiful thing. And you can keep a finger on that. And that I'd be really appreciative whenever an administrator or teacher did that for my kids. But it also has to do with the fact that we're supporting this school in a way that they feel like they can come to you. They know the kids well enough because they're not completely overwhelmed with all this other stuff. It's a safe space. And I want that for all of our kids, not just yours and mine.
Yeah, sure.
But all of our kids.
Definitely not just ours. It's like just ours. Nobody else gets. Yeah. I have a slightly unfair position I'm going to put you in because I was on a call regarding a charter school just this morning and learned something new and, obviously want to get that out there, but I didn't know this 12 hours ago. So do you know what the two classes that are most populated in West Ada, K through 12?
You know what? I don't.
It's the 11th and 12th. I didn't know this either. 11th and 12th are the largest classes in the district. And from there, it just steps down, plateaus some, but then keeps stepping. And that was really interesting here because, again, I didn't know it until, like 6 hours ago. I was like, whoa, I had no idea. So the district, when we're talking about growth, I think the district also is going to have to start taking into account, yes, perhaps the population of this area is indeed growing, but that doesn't mean we are actually growing as a school district because once 11 and 12 graduate, we actually have smaller class sizes for sophomores and freshmen. Do you think that that's something that will actually self-correct and we may pick up additional, juniors and seniors along the way so that the class sizes are actually analogous in 2 years? Or do you think that there actually may be a way that the area is growing, but the school district is experiencing a much smaller proportional growth or no growth at all? because of the prevalence of homeschooling, prevalence of private schools popping up left and right. You have more charter schools popping up to take pressure off, right? There's one in Avamore right now. There are additional schools coming online.
And it's interesting. I'd like to know the actual, statistics on 11th and 12th grade size versus the rest to see if, there really was 3 standard deviations in terms of, the population size or demographic change.
Sure. How severe is the drop, right? You're like,
exactly.
If it's 5 people, it doesn't matter.
If we're averaging.
Right.
So it'd be interesting to know, and that's something I should probably look into and will look into is how those sizes, kind of compute. We're always going to see waves. We're always going to see fluctuations in sizes of classrooms and even, the personalities of these grades. They're always changing. But I still think you need to take into account that as a county in general, as a school district in general, this area has suffered but also gained from a lot of growth and continues to do so. That's not going to change anytime soon. I mean, we do see a little bit of it, kind of plateauing off in terms of growth, and the rapid rate of growth is kind of coming down. But it's grown. Teachers feel the pressure. What I want to kind of dissect is the pressures that they're facing now. Yes, we're going to have things that we need to look down the road in terms of growth and size and class sizes. But what I want to know is how can we best serve these classes today and in the next 4 years?
Gotcha. Okay. A little bit of a shift but kind of connected to this as well with large class sizes, right? Mm-hmm. And we're not, I have not seen somebody say like, we're falling apart at the seams, but they're saying, hey, look, we are at capacity.
We're worried.
Yeah, we're worried. With larger class sizes, fewer resources for counselors and everything, engagement, kids get lost. Kids get, some people fall in the cracks. I have a family member who really struggled with that in a pretty large school. Mm-hmm. There are problems with drug abuse, right? Mm-hmm. Alcohol and drug abuse. And Idaho itself is surrounded by states that have become very, very liberal with drug production, distribution, all of those things. Mm-hmm. Do you think that the district is doing enough to keep drugs and alcohol and just kind of keep that enemy at bay and protect our students from it? Or do you think that there are obvious things that can be improved upon? I think everybody would agree. It's like, listen, one case is too many, but we also have to be realists. We can't, people have agency, right? And that's very unfortunate, but it's true. Mm-hmm. It's not unfortunate people have agency. It's unfortunate they use agency to make bad
negatively
decisions.
Sometimes.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's not bad that we have free will.
Yeah, we learn from those things the most.
Well, we hope. Anyway, so are they doing enough, or specifically, how can they improve?
Another really great question and a topic that's pretty close to my heart. I think that as a society in general, whether it's West Ada, whether it's Idaho, or my school, I want these topics to be open and honest conversations. And I think maybe as even a parent or a family member, my fault has been in treating these drug addiction or mental health issues as something that's almost taboo, or giving these kids a feeling of shame. And I think that as a district, being willing to open up and talk about drug abuse and potential problems, and you're going to see it, and it's going to be in the real world. You're not going to be just stuck in West Ada forever. You're going to be out there and wherever you go. These are issues that they need to be addressing globally. Can they improve upon it? I'm sure we can always improve upon it. I'm sure we can improve upon a lot of things but counselors and mental health and being aware of what's going on is really important. I think that, we had, I don't know if you were this old, but I'm going to date myself here. We had DARE, right? We had kids.
Drug abuse resistant education.
Exactly.
I have a certificate of graduation.
So do I, So, and I think, we are stretching our resources as a society thin by asking, people to come in and do DARE again. But
speaking of thin, can I offer you a slight bit more coffee?
Some more. But what a great way for opening up the conversation. DARE made it so we could talk about it.
Right.
You know, it wasn't stigmatized when I was in middle school. I mean, it was on some level, but we didn't see it that way yet.
Right.
We were able to talk about it, which made it less scary, which made it more, I could ask an adult a question. And I think that's important to I don't want to say let's not have our kids be afraid of drugs. They should be. But what I want them to, what I would love to bring to the district is more transparency, more open conversation, more kids. This is why it's a problem.
Right. Yeah. There's so many.
There's
so many like that. There was I worked with a lot of, again, I was in college admissions for almost 20 years. And there was one particular group of rugby players. I really liked these kids, 16, 17, 18. I was an athlete and just like these big 17-year-olds, and I'd always make fun of them, and they'd always come in like banged up. Anyway, so we got into this big conversation with regard to edibles and pot in general. It's like, guys, you really don't understand. I mean, look, I think a lot of young people have tried, alcohol at some point. A lot, not all of them, and I'm not saying it's a good idea or forgivable at all. Young people shouldn't be drinking. That's just the way it goes. But it's kind of like, all right, look, you have a beer or two, you act like an idiot, you realize it's not a good idea, and, Budweiser's trash. Like you understand this pretty quickly. But with edibles, and you also know that if you grab a bottle of tequila, you're going to throw up really fast. Like these are two distinct experiences, and you know what's coming down the pipe. The problem with edibles, as these guys found out, is you have no idea what you're getting into. So these particular kids were getting on a plane to go to a rugby tournament out of state. And of course, as some idiot 17-year-olds thought, they're like, wouldn't it be funny if we ate a gummy before we got on the plane? So they popped these gummies. Oh, it was terrible. So they popped these gummies. And of course, they had no idea how much they were ingesting. They didn't you just don't know. It's like, it's not labeled, right? So they eat these gummies and some kid freaks out. He's like crying in the airport, like running in circles, like loses his mind, right? And this other kid that was there, one of my students, his dad grabs him. He's like, look at me. And the kid's like, oh, he's like, you idiot. What is wrong? Like, why did you do this? So of course they yank him off the plane, take him home. And I was told him, I was like, you don't understand. The risk is so much greater with stuff like this. And you need to recognize that. Like, if you drink a beer, it's going to give a certain experience. If you take slam some hard alcohol, it's a different experience. Hopefully you've never had those experiences at all, but you'll come to understand this. You have no idea what you're eating.
What's going in there.
It's so readily available. It's so easy to get a hold of. And again, with here, we're like 45 minutes away from Oregon. Like people could drive to Oregon, get a little container of gummies and bring it back. You don't know if it's a mint or if somebody's going to the moon in a half an hour.
Right.
Like the risk is too great.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, and that is the problem, right? Because it's not regulated the way, I guess, alcohol, for example, would be. We know when we get a Budweiser, whatever you were,
any beer.
If you get a beer at a grocery store, you know
Right.
what's inside it.
Right.
Or at least grocery, their FDA is supposed to be regulating all this stuff.
Right.
But you get a gummy or whatever. I mean, I've never actually tried gummies, but
I don't know what the regulation is. I don't know how it works. All I know is that like
it's
people
man-made.
will eat
People
too
are putting
much.
stuff in there. I mean,
and
people
they're
are
like,
using
boom.
battery acid in these things. I don't
Right.
know. So, I mean, we used to watch that video. This is your egg, or the egg video. This is your brain. This is your brain on drugs. That thing stuck with me forever. Still to this day, I see that frying pan. But kids need to know that these are dangerous, and this is why they're dangerous. It's not just, oh, don't do this, and they're dangerous.
You know what we need? We need a once a week Faces of Meth.
Oh, gosh.
Like once a week they have to look at pictures.
Oh, their face
face it for
falling
5
off. Yeah.
minutes. Like they don't have their teeth.
Oh,
I actually
skin's falling off.
We in class there's an app that you can get, or there was like a program where you
please no.
upload a photo and then it's like this is
is
what you'll
you.
look
This
like
is you
after
on-
5 years of meth. And here are these like I remember because I was like, who wants to take a picture? And this girl, this like wonderful volleyball girl, she was really quiet. She's like, oh, put mine in. So we put her in and she's all,
I
But-
don't even do the aging app. I mean, seriously.
I know
it's
it was pretty ridiculous. So you feel like with drugs and alcohol in particular, look, you can always improve. That's kind of where you are.
And mental health. Yeah, I think that we can always improve. We can always make it more of a dinner topic conversation. I think that, if we say, don't ever do this, and don't give a reason why, there's a little childish part of me that's like, but why? But we say, hey, we don't want you doing this because this is going to eat away at the ventricle in your brain. And, tomorrow you might not be able to say the ABCs. This is why.
Right.
Kids understand if we say, this is a picture of a normal 10-year-old brain. This is a picture of a 10-year-old brain that has been introduced to a toxic substance like methamphetamine or, cocaine, heroin. Here you go, opiates. And I think it's really important for people to know how dangerous, why they're dangerous. You could take an opiate one time and die, kid. You don't know what Sam's given you in that mint box. Right. It's terrifying to me as a mom and as a parent, but also as the scientific part of me is going, we don't know exactly like you said. We don't know what's going in our bodies, and I worked way too hard running and cycling and swimming and in academics to put those kinds of things in my body, and I hope that my child feels the same way. Right. We give you all these other opportunities, aren't they great? Don't waste it. Right.
Now, speaking of opportunities, the college and career that West Data puts on, I think is pretty cool because there are real, genuine avenues to produce thriving, contributing individuals in society that are not a 100% wrapped around, you have to go to this 4-year university and study a particular thing, which I have a great appreciation for.
Oh, yeah. Some of the schools in Meridian are amazing. In that regard.
Amazing. So, we have electives, we have actual avenues that people can take that either don't or just aren't really taken by education and just, maybe they don't have the aptitude for it. And that's fine. I wholeheartedly do not think everybody needs or should go to college. I think for a large portion of the people that are going now, they're either going when they shouldn't be going or they're going and being, they're getting an education delivered that is not going to have a practical function to them in the future. What do you think that can be done to improve those offerings that are college alternatives? And what do you think can be done to improve the college ready or college interested students' experience in West Data?
Oh gosh, that's a great question.
By the way, that dinging, is that you?
I'm sorry. I thought I muted this all, but I'm sorry about that.
It's fine.
So those courses and those electives and those opportunities, I think are absolutely amazing. And some of these schools have done such a good job. And I wish that we could, give more schools these opportunities and these classes and electives. And doing career fairs and stuff like that is an amazing way to open a kid's mind to what they want to do. But kids don't know what they want to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I don't know if you, grew up at 4 knowing you wanted to be a podcaster.
Definitely not.
So to take a child and say, this is your track, I don't think is ever right. But to say, hey, these are all the opportunities we have for you. And I want you to try to experience them in whatever kind of fits or feels right, or you just have a passion for, let's run with it, is really a great is awesome. It's what those schools in Meridian are able to do. And maybe having, access to those occasionally and visiting those schools and being able for other kids to see that those are the opportunities out there, and parents to see what opportunities are out there for the kids. They know their kids best. A lot of these parents know very well and have really good intuition when it comes to their kids' capabilities or likes or dislikes, and just being able to get a taste of those things is really important. Letting people know that those schools are there, and that those opportunities are there. But gosh, yeah, we've done a great job with those, and props to the district and to those teachers and those schools, because they are amazing. I have friends that their kids have gone through them, and what a blessing to be able to take advantage of that.
Right. With the college aspect, though, because it sounds like the emphasis here is, hey, look, we're doing a pretty good job with,
with some of these programs.
Yeah, right.
College is tough because I think it's really the kid that's going to determine, how well they're going to do and set themselves up for, and what their drive is. But again, allowing them to explore some of these things and doing those fairs and getting to see people at Boise State, or, the University of Idaho and opening kids' eyes to what they can do if they go to college. Programs that are available in college, bringing those colleges here to kind of, do those kinds of college fairs is wonderful. I grew up in a town where we didn't have that. I knew of a couple of the Ivy League names, and I was fortunate enough to get to go visit, these 5 schools on their dime and get to pick, and it was fascinating, but I didn't know anything about them before, graduating. And had I known a little bit more about the programs and a little bit more about what was available to me if I wanted to work that way, might have opened doors that I never knew existed. And I think that's the same for all of these kids. I want them to be able to see programs that they might not be close to. If they're interested in aeronautical science, where can we go and who can we bring in? If we have a large group of kids that wants to see this or has, kind of indicated that there's an interest there, we have a lot of resources locally that we can bring in and kind of open these doors to. But I think that, it's a matter of getting involved and getting teachers and parents on board and getting involved. I don't know exactly how we would bring in, representatives from Notre Dame to kind of come and check out our kids, but we can open their world to them, online and doing, kind of a high school, pre-college. If you're interested in what kind of programs are you interested in, let's look at these opportunities, kind of pre-college class. I know they did that in college, like for graduate school. We had a class that was kind of like, are you geared towards graduate school and getting your PhD, or were you kind of more looking for med school options, or were you looking for law school? We have these channels, these classes you can take to kind of prepare you for what's next, what's available.
Gotcha.
I'm all about information. What's available?
And again, that the last thing that you said is really what I'm wondering. Do you think we're giving enough opportunities for the students who want to be competitive? So the school I went to, I took physics. Okay, we didn't have an honors physics program. And for a period of time after I graduated, we actually lost our physics teacher. We still had a physics class, but it was like revolving substitutes. They essentially gave the kids the books and let them have run of the lab room. And they were like, okay, you're in physics now, so like teach yourself. You're not that scenario. You're obviously not giving the students the opportunity that want to be very competitive. You're not really giving them the resources to make their own opportunity. So yes, I do agree that it's very dependent on the kid. Is the kid interested in this stuff? But do you think West Ada is doing enough to provide ample classes and opportunities with, say, college readiness classes or AP classes and additional higher end academic electives and things like that, so that when students do graduate that are committed to college, they're competitive in the landscape?
I think that we're doing a really good job. I think that we can all, again, there's room for improvement, but I think the district itself is doing a really good job. I think that, Eagle High, Boise High, well, Boise's outside our district, but the Meridian high schools that I've seen, they do a very good job at college readiness, exam readiness, and sometimes, maybe to a fault, because I think that, we're teaching, we're gearing towards an exam, or we're gearing towards an SAT, or we're gearing towards a standardized test. And it's important because we want our kids to succeed, but we also want them to be well-rounded and not necessarily taught to the test. But I have seen a lot of really neat programs that are relatively new and new to me in this district. There's always room for growth, and there's always room for more and development. I'd love to see what teachers kind of put together in terms of a college readiness package for, whatever they have available. But I do think that we've done a very good job growing with our students.
Gotcha. Mari, listen, I've had you for a while. Thank you for coming in. I want to give you a chance. Is there something I've missed? Is there something near and dear to you that you want to hammer or just say that I didn't ask?
Gosh, I'm tempted to, just because they're hot button, but I'm also worried about how they'll come forward.
Just get crazy.
Just crazy.
Say it.
We live in such a crazy world right now, and there's so many issues that are plaguing, education in general. I mean, we have people talking about critical race theory. We have people talking about, I guess you brought it up before when it comes to our schools, letting us know if our child's
right.
Kind of having an identity crisis. There's so many things that are we're so emotionally attached to. But I do think it's important to kind of dissect why we're so attached to them and why we're so emotionally invested in them. My throat's getting dry. And a critical race theory, upper level education issue, but
well, I mean, also very clearly bleeding into elementary and middle school and high school education in a lot of areas of the country. So yeah, I mean, the origins were upper level education, but the representation it's all over the place.
It is, and I'm probably setting myself up here, but our history is really important. There's a reason we say don't let history repeat itself, or learn from your past, or learn from your mistakes. And I want to make sure that the education my children are getting is really well-rounded and does teach them history and does teach them consequences. And, it's not all beautiful roses and, great history. We have, as a country, pretty conflicted history, but we're a wonderful country. I'm so proud to, be a member of this country. I'm now sounding very patriotic.
You could sound like worse things.
I could, and there's another one, when did patriotism become negative? It became negative, recently because of what's happening in adult politics. And that's too bad because it does trickle down into how we treat each other in schools. And in all fairness, I do come from a position that of wanting to see people equitably or equally. I do come from a place of wanting to preach equality, but I know it's not. I know it's kind of utopian. I do want our kids to learn harsh critical history lessons, or I shouldn't say critical, harsh history lessons. I want them to know the bad and the good, because I don't want them to repeat it. I also think that when it comes to things like book bans, it's everywhere, right? We're talking about these things as adults because we're heated and we're passionate about something and we're ideological about something. But who is it affecting? We've already read the book. We know what the book's about. We're choosing who it affects in the future, right? If I say your kid can't access this book because I think it's bad, but you don't think it's bad, it's impacting you and your child. Parents should be able to say, I don't want this read in my home. But they shouldn't be able to say, your kid can't read it either.
Okay, I'm going to push back on you a little bit here.
Please. I was hoping for a little bit more.
Yeah, well, I don't like to interrupt if I can avoid
you're good.
It. Yes, but you don't want Penthouse or Hustler in the high schools. So when we talk about book banning, we have very clear concepts existing of restrictions that we think are perhaps obscene, or the educational value of the obscene material does not warrant the obscenity. So yes, I understand that there's an idea of like, hey, your particular morality should not affect my child's morality. But just as you said, if a parent's like, hey, I think my fifth grader should actually have access to the history of Penthouse, that parent can provide it. Mm-hmm. But we should have, or do you agree that we should have a very clear set of agreed upon principles that govern books that are accessible to everyone within a public school?
In so much as these are kids, yes. I feel like there is appropriate material that is age appropriate versus morale appropriate. You're kind of, I guess I'm trying to get to are you asking me?
Well, if you believe in age appropriateness, then you do, age appropriateness presupposes some metric of this is inappropriate based on the months you've been on the earth.
Right.
So there's a sense of propriety there that's already in existence. So we would be banning books for anyone under a certain age. The idea of a book ban, I think, it's almost disingenuous because it's like, look, we're not stopping people from purchasing these books. We're not saying if you have this book in your house, it's illegal. We're just saying that in this public school district, we're not going to have these books accessible to this age of people. That's not really a book ban. No. That's just saying we are applying common sense and have
But whose common sense?
Well, that's a great question, and something that should be flushed out. But there should be some mechanism so my kid, when he goes to high school, doesn't have access to books like Genderqueer or Lawn Boy that have what I would make strong argument for is pornographic representations of people, of human beings engaging in, sexual acts. So yeah, those books exist 100%. But, if there's a third person here and the third person's like, listen, Penthouse is just people. Like, they take anatomy. Like, we should let this book exist in the school district. I assume you'd be like, yeah, that's not a great idea. I would say that's not a great idea.
Probably not a great idea.
Probably not a great idea. So the
Probably
idea
for home,
idea of relativism when it's applied to a book in schools is like, well, whose morality? Okay, you're right. Because we can't all agree on, there are fluctuations in what we would want to tolerate as individuals within a community that go to this public school. Do you agree that it would probably be a good idea to say, hey, look, because there's a wide range here, the wise choice, and again, this is a question, do you think it would be a wise choice to err on the more conservative side from a public school standpoint? And of course, allow agency for parents and families and children to access books elsewhere. But like, we're going to land more conservative, not all the way conservative, but more conservative, so that, people don't
get offended.
No. Would you say seeing Penthouse in a public school library, would that cause offense to you, or would you have disgust and significant disapproval? Because there's a
difference.
We can moderate and downplay the reaction people would have and be like, were you offended by that? Is that upsetting to you? Or recognize, hey, this is wildly inappropriate.
Yeah. And that's a tangled question that you posed again. But I think that, I probably would err in public schools a little bit more conservatively than I would say my house. In my house, if a kid wants to watch a horror movie that's rated R, I'm going to say no. However, if you want to go pick up the book and you think you can read through that book, I'll take you to the library. And that probably is not every parent's view. And I appreciate that. But I also want them to be able to go to their librarian and say, hey, I want to learn a little bit more about this. Do we have it available? And if she says no, here's where you can have your parent take you. Or, here's another alternative. I just don't want issues to be flatly censored. I read The Color Purple in 7th grade. Blew my mind. Might have been a little bit might have been a little bit too far the other way.
Yeah.
But
The Color Purple horribly painted my view as a man.
Yes.
From a very young age. So
Terrified.
when you talk right. And of course the perpetrators are male in that. And I thought the representation of male-female interaction was that I was this horrible pig, like taking advantage of somebody. So that's a really and that's a book that is not even on anyone's radar for like, oh, this is a bad book. I'm not trying to put it on anybody's radar. No. I'm not. What I'm saying is you mentioned this book and I had this conversation 4 months ago. Yeah, keep going.
Well,
I'm sorry.
So as of looking back, there's parts of me that are like are glad that I read it. Would I want my daughter or my son to read it? Kind of puts me in a pickle. A moral pickle. Yeah, I want them to read it down the road, but maybe 7th grade is not where I'd have them read it.
Right. So again, I think the idea that somebody controlling what your child can and cannot read.
At school, let's be just clear. At school, yes.
Well, can and cannot read would be distasteful. Appropriate for school for everyone.
Thank you.
Is a much different issue.
Yes.
Right.
Much different issue.
It sounds like you're saying, look, err more on the conservative side for public schools. Everybody has Amazon. If parents feel strongly about the history of whatever.
Or even the public library. Yeah. Another plug for public libraries.
Sure, but public libraries should probably have like age restrictions.
They do.
Right?
Well, and they do to some degree. I mean, you go down to this public library and a kid can walk into the adult section whenever they want and still check out a book. There's nobody monitoring what they're checking out.
Well, public libraries might be a discussion for another day.
Oh, well, hopefully not. No, come on. We're totally off base here. And I feel like I've totally taken a different road.
Listen, it's all good. I appreciate you. Thank you for what you're doing. I really appreciate the thought you've put into this today. I mean, you're obviously thinking through a lot of very complex issues, and it's obvious that you want the best for our kids.
Thank you.
So,
I think if I can say anything
yes.
before you edit all this out, is that I want there to be a conversation about issues. I don't want there to be a hands down no, hands down yes, a mandate. I want there to be a conversation, and I want to be part of that conversation, and I want to be ears for teachers and students and parents. And I know it sounds idealistic, but I think that there is a place for that, and that's at the board. And I want to have a seat at the table because I think I'd like to hear them out and work collectively to answer some of these really complex questions.
I love your call for communication. Thanks. I can't say it enough. I love communicating, and when I hear people come in and say, we need to listen more, we need to convey more, we all just need to get more on the same page, and communication is a piece, I get very excited. Yeah. So again, thank you for what you're doing. Thanks for putting in the effort. Good luck with the election.
Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by mtustudios.com. If you're looking to start a podcast or make content for any level of your business, MTU Studios can help. Just reach out to us today and we can start shooting tomorrow.